Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Hi. Happy March. I'm Ian. I'm not Ian. I'm Karen.
I'm Ian.
Sometimes I might wish I was Ian. And today we've got Gloria with us from Avanti Residential. Gloria is their Director of Revenue Management, and we could not be more excited. I can't wait for everybody to hear from Gloria's story, all of it. And just, since this is only our second episode, we won't do this every time, but just giving a little foundation around the show. Ian and I both come from the leasing floor, and we appreciate the on-site teams to no end. They are the brand personality of our brick and mortar communities, and they bring life to everything. And the leasing front lines are the heartbeat of our properties, and wanting to share voices from across our industry that aren't necessarily heard from all the time. So, last week we had Tracy with Learner, and she was fantastic. And we've got Gloria today, and we've got some great upcoming guests scheduled, and just truly wanting everyone to hear from these honest, authentic voices and add some value to your day for a few minutes. So without further ado, Gloria, would you just share a little bit about your background and history, and then also the role that you play within Avanti, because people hear Director of Revenue Management, but what really is that role?
Sure. So thank you for having me today. I'm super, super excited to join you guys. I've been in property management for about 10 years. I actually started out as a leasing agent, like many of us in the industry. I've been in the revenue management world for about 6 years now, and now I'm the Director of Revenue Management with Avanti. A lot of times when they hear revenue management, they assume that I just manage revenue for the company. It's more than that. I've also been told I'm the gatekeeper of price, something along those lines, yes. But at the end of the day, I'm there to navigate pricing and navigate what's happening in the market with the on-site teams. And then ultimately our end goal is to maximize revenue.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. So diving into some different questions for you. I mean, I love that we're having you on today, not just because you're an amazing speaker, but just your role as the Director of Revenue Management. I feel like is a role that's just very unknown by a lot of people in the industry. It's revenue management really isn't that old in our industry and has picked up a ton of steam over the last decade. And so really curious and excited really for you to share a little bit more about that role. And to start it off, one of the things that we thought we'd ask is, what are some of the biggest misnomers about revenue management, and understanding that balance of the human piece of it versus how much is just numbers on a computer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the top two misconceptions about revenue management is the fact that you lose complete control of your pricing. One, a lot of people are scared that once they're on revenue management, they no longer have a say. The second one would be that you essentially set it up and then you leave it. So just to elaborate a little bit, although we want to trust technology, it's always going to have its imperfections. So going back to last week's episode with Tracy, something that really resonated with me was the human component behind all of this, right? So many don't realize that the only technical piece to revenue management is really the data and understanding the data and the algorithms behind it. But the human piece is still so relevant and plays an important role when it comes to the decision-making and pricing overall. I always remind my teams, it should never be a pricing issue because you have complete control of your pricing at the end of the day.
Awesome. Yeah. So on a day-to-day basis, are you doing a lot, adjusting pricing a lot on a hands-on on a day-to-day basis, or is the system and mostly just you looking it over? What's some of that balance? I'm curious.
I wouldn't say I'm in there manually adjusting settings every day, but I am reviewing, lease transactional data. So how many leases do we get? How many renewals? Did they convert traffic? A lot of people make fun of me and tell me that LRO is like my baby because it requires a lot of attention. there's not one day or maybe even 30 minutes where I don't go in, at least look at LRO and look at a property statistics. I'm in there all day. I live, I breathe it. I mean, that's what I'm there for, is just to make sure that things are happening without a hiccup. I'm the behind the scenes.
Awesome. So yeah, and just, trying to understand a little bit more about, the revenue management, is it, so there's a lot from like the market conditions are playing a ton into it. What are some of the different factors that go into actually making up and composing those revenue management, and what are those different pieces that you look at?
So I work with the on-site teams on a weekly or even more frequent basis. And what we're doing is really just analyzing the data together. So we're looking at, what's their exposure today? What does their availability look like? Let's take a look at your comps. Have we seen any changes in your comp rents or concessions? Also, we look at the 4 Ps. Is there something going on that's impacting traffic this week? 4 Ps goes back to what I started with as a leasing agent. And, I feel like it's been carried through, and I know Karen's super excited about it as well, and she probably knows it, and it works. I mean, when you're really there assessing the 4 Ps, 9 times out of 10, price is usually the last piece of it. And it's usually not a pricing issue. But, one thing with revenue management is that we're not always going to say that it's not a price issue. You have to be willing to accept that sometimes it can be a price issue, and sometimes overrides will happen, but we need to assess the data before we make that call.
I think you share so much in that one answer there. One of the things is when you talk about the price being last and looking at that last, and truly helping the teams, asking the right questions to help the teams uncover if there's something else before it. And I remember, and even still, when you're in a meeting and you're being asked questions, like Gloria, you were just saying, I'm asking what's going on with our competition and what's going on with this apartment home versus this one. Sometimes, especially when you're not performing, right? Because usually when you're begging for a price change, you feel attacked.
Yeah.
And any question, no matter how it's presented, can feel like an attack. How do you come across to the team so that they know that you're truly collaborating with them, and not attacking with your questions?
I think this goes back to, the fact that the human component, again, is just so important in this piece, because before COVID, a lot of revenue managers are usually behind the screen. They're behind the computer. There's no face-to-face interaction. So a lot of the times, Karen, like you mentioned, questions can feel like attack. Yeah. And a lot of them get on the defense, right? Because we're telling them we're not this person that's going to come in and control their pricing, but our questions make it seem that way.
Yep.
So something that I'm doing is, every other week, or, whenever the teams are wanting to, or, sometimes I'll just force them to, I'll have them turn on their cameras so that they know that these questions are coming from a good place. They know that I've done my research, but I also give them the floor, give them the opportunity to tell me what's going on. Let's have a dialogue. Let's have a conversation. It's not just me trying to bark orders at you.
I think of the Wizard of Oz, like nobody gets in to see the wizard. Like behind the curtain, here comes Gloria.
Yeah.
The wizard of revenue management. I mean, I remember being so afraid when it first got introduced, right? Because it's foreign. But I think one of the coolest moments was when somebody described it as, well, when you go on to, get your airline ticket and you have the different choices, it's the same thing. And being able to meet the needs of our customers is so invaluable while still setting ourselves up and running a business for success. It's both sides, and everybody wins when it's managed correctly, both on the AI, the automated side of it, and the algorithms, and then also from your human component side.
Right. Yep.
And
totally. I mean, I think, what you mentioned at the beginning, Gloria, we talked some with Tracy last week about too, is just understanding that, for their on-site teams, they a lot of times can view that revenue management role as, like Karen said, this mystery person that's the data geek, so to speak, that's really into it, which a lot of times is true. But getting them involved is such a critical element that's missed so often, because, when they understand the components that are going to actually this entire, what's going into the secret sauce of the algorithm, and they're involved in that, then they do a better job of helping assist us in finding out what are those true data pieces and knowing what information they need to collect. And that, getting that all together and having them be connected to that part of it is such a critical part. And I think probably a huge role that you play is actually, bridging that gap between what happens on site and, what's happening, from the math behind the scenes.
Yeah, and having been on the other side, that makes things a lot easier for us to relate to one another as well. And I think that's a huge piece with my role, is that I understand when they tell me they're struggling with people or product. Like, I get it. I've been there. Yeah. So that helps a lot.
Gloria, we'll come back in a minute and pick up where we left off with you, but we'll pop to a little commercial for a quick minute.
Good.
The Open Road Network was created to give the amateur podcaster a voice in a very noisy and complicated world. The goal of the network is to motivate, it's to inspire, it's to challenge, it's to entertain our viewers as well as our hosts. The Open Road Network is an idea where we get away from that professional $1 million voices that are out there and start listening to the people who are everyday Americans who want to have a voice and want to be able to make an impact. So tune in every single day here on the Open Road Network as we are continuing to introduce new shows that are aimed to motivate, inspire, challenge, and entertain.
Ian, just to pick up too on what you said right before we went to break, about instilling that confidence in people by sharing the why behind what's going on, right? It doesn't matter if we're talking revenue management or whatever we're speaking about, everybody's going to be able to collaborate better and have a better, stronger discussion around it. Gloria, you mentioned a little bit of this already, this front of stage versus back of stage, and across all industries, people talk about that, like what the consumer sees, and that's that front of stage, and then all of what's going on behind the scenes to make it happen. And you've mentioned the human component and the algorithms, but could you talk about and describe the balance between being behind the scenes and then that front of stage a little bit more, just expanding on it with revenue management specifically? Again, I do feel like it's something that's so hidden and behind the curtain.
Yeah, I mean, behind the scenes, it's a lot more detailed than a lot of people realize. There's a lot of data analysis that goes behind the scenes. I'm not just going off of hearsay. I have to validate what they're saying on site, right? So behind the scenes, I'm doing a lot of comp searches. I'm looking at market trends. I'm looking at performance to market. How are we performing? I mean, if we're 97% occupied, are we doing well because we're 97? But what if the market's 98, 99, and they're still pushing rents, but here we are at 97, 98, we've stopped pushing rents. There's always opportunity out there, and you really don't know how well you're doing unless you're looking at the data. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work with that. When it comes to front stage with the teams, I can't just tell them to push their rents $100 just because, right? So explaining the why behind. I have to show them that data so that I can help them understand why a $100 increase makes sense. It's funny because if you start with take a $100 increase today, a lot of people will be very reluctant. But if you actually start with providing data and providing additional feedback and supporting the fact that they can achieve this $100 increase, you'd be surprised at how easily they'll accept the $100 increase.
Yeah, it's so true. Just trying it. And that resonates so well because I, of course, have friends in property management. And I remember, as people have had, property managers especially, as it's been introduced, having phone calls with friends where we're just being candid with one another. And they're like, there's no way we're going to get these rents. And my story relayed back to when I took a CAPS course and got that certification. And out of this room, there were probably only 40% of the home office team members in that room that had implemented it at their companies. But the 40% who had talked about and shared how much it had impacted them and the rent increases that they were getting that they didn't think they would have ever gotten. So I'd share that with my property manager friends, and then they'd call a few months later and be like, oh my gosh, we're totally getting these rents. It's neat to push yourself and try and push that limit for sure.
I always tell them, you do have complete control of your pricing, right? You just need to have those conversations, and it doesn't hurt to try. If it doesn't work for 1 or 2 days and you don't feel comfortable, let's go back. We can inch our way through, right? Minimal increases. I always talk about moving your pricing in moderate increments. And that seems to do well with a lot of the on-site team members who've never used revenue management before. And it's a comfortable strategy.
I think that's such a smart strategy, and it's eating that elephant, right? One bite at a time.
Exactly.
I'm sure you can relate, Ian.
Yes. One question that I have for you here is, in looking at revenue management and really any data analysis, it's all very dependent on trends, on things that are happening and over time, and looking and analyzing those trends. And I'm very curious for an event like COVID this last year and how much of an impact and change that has on the entire industry, but on something like revenue management that is dependent on all these different trends. I'm curious on how you approach that. What lessons did you learn really from COVID and having a event that changes so much of the day-to-day trends, and how do you handle that from a revenue management standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of our competitors are on revenue management. So most of our comps have pricing changing daily. What I found was there was a lot of volatility in the market when it came to rents or even concessions offered. It's almost as if for the first month, we couldn't really keep up because there was just so many changes happening. So something that we implemented was more frequent market surveys. We went from once a week, which is the norm, to about 2 to 3 times a week. A lot of properties on revenue management, you'd be comfortable with a 94 to 96% occupancy. But during COVID, we found ourselves panicking. We wanted 95, 97, and then it became about heads on beds. And you don't really operate revenue management with a heads on bed strategy because if you're fully occupied, right, there's no opportunity to grow rent. So it was a struggle for a lot of the team members to find that balance of occupancy and rent growth, but then also taking into consideration that we're going through a pandemic. So a lot of trial and error, but I think the one thing that I personally did was I communicated with my team members more often than I think a lot of people would do as a revenue manager. We had our set pricing calls once a week, but I also made sure to check in, follow up 2 to 3 times a week just to make sure they were comfortable before the weekend because of how volatile the market was.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that makes total sense with that much volatility. Just increase the frequency and really make sure that what's going on there. Totally makes sense. So kind of follow-on question then, I guess, too, is with everything, not just from COVID, but as you've seen, through revenue management grow throughout your years of being involved in it, where's it going? I mean, what do you see as some of the future in revenue management? Is there ways to enhance it? I mean, we talk and hear all about AI and the impact it's going to have, and technology. I'm just curious on what are those takeaways, and where do you think revenues management's going, near and long term here?
I think The future of revenue management is that more than likely everyone will be on it at some point. A lot of people don't realize that you are experiencing revenue management even outside of this industry, whether you're going grocery shopping, like Karen, you mentioned, buying an airline ticket, hotels. The way those rates are changing every day, sometimes even 3 to 4 times a day, that's revenue management. You're experiencing it firsthand in your real life scenario. So I would expect that for our industry, the future of revenue management would be that everybody's on it. Let's figure out what everybody's doing. Let's get data. The more data, the better, right? And once you're on revenue management, it's really hard to go back. A lot of people realize that with manual pricing, there's a lot of room for missed opportunity. So that's where I see the future with revenue management, that we can see all of our comps on it eventually one day.
Well, and that's helpful too, right? And such great insight. And I think that also provides some comfort, if you will, in an odd way to anybody who's afraid of it. It's all around us and you are affected by it. You are impacted by it. We're up against another break, but when we come back, just wanted to ask you, Gloria, to think about the questions what are some of the questions that you regularly get from on-site team members? Because personally, for me, I'm picturing you behind a cockpit with the weather systems over here on the screen, with pricing on this screen, and all the market surveys on this screen. So think about that in your mind, and then when we come back, we'll pick up on those questions that you've gotten.
Sounds good.
Introducing Remote Lock Universal Access Control. Remote Lock lets you manage any lock, from smart locks to hardwired access control systems, securing every door from the main entrance to the rooftop patio. And you get to choose from the best top-of-the-line smart locks out there, from brands like Yale, Schlage, Kwikset, August, Mercury, and many more. Now you can configure and add access at the push of a button and set up customized schedules for each and every user, all within a matter of minutes. It even works with property management and booking software like Airbnb, Guesty, Entrata, RealPage, and more. With Remote Lock, you'll finally have a future-proof solution that controls all your properties around the world from a single, easy-to-use platform. Let Remote Lock be the last access control partner you'll ever need.
Great. Now I want a beer. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. So, Gloria, what are some of those questions that you get regularly from people, or you just want to shed some light on?
I would say one of the most common questions, or I guess statements, would be, my comp's offering a month free. Should we? Or, they're offering concessions. Should we consider offering a concession? I get that all the time. And I get it. It's a state of panic, right? If you're comfortable and then all of a sudden your comp starts offering concession, your biggest fear is that you're about to lose all your traffic to them. Comps should only have an impact on your pricing or your overall strategy if you're in high exposure or low occupancy. But just because the comp is offering a concession doesn't necessarily mean that we should follow suit. And the reasoning behind that is, maybe there's something else happening at that property that we don't really know, right? Maybe they're, going under contract and they need to hit a certain occupancy goal. There's so many different factors that can come into play. And unless you really know the reason, it's not always the best strategy to follow whatever your comps are doing. For sure.
What about, just with revenue management too and all the different components, is there anything that's not yet fine-tuned yet for revenue management that could have improvement there?
I think right now I would say, so with LRO right now, there is room for manual entry error. Right now, we select our comps and the teams are manually entering in those comp rents. One day if you add an extra 0 or an extra 5, or you put in the incorrect rent, that can really skew the data. And unless someone raises their hand, that's what's being advertised today at the front door. So I think if we fine-tune the competitor process a little bit, that would really help eliminate any of the human error. But other than that, I don't really see anything.
Excellent. Another question that I had, I know we chatted before about this, is just kind of, understanding the benefits of, having a revenue management director in-house. I know you have that for Avanti Residential, and there's some differing opinions. I'm just curious on your perspective there of, what are the benefits of having in-house revenue management director and that role?
I think the biggest benefit would be the fact that you're invested, right? Because you're part of the company. You want everyone to succeed. If they win, you win, and vice versa. I am only looking at what my properties are doing and how well we're doing to market. I'm not concerned about others. I just want our properties to perform the best. Versus if it's not really in-house, I don't know if that feeling is mutual, right? Because there's other clients they're taking care of. And although they're going to do their best, they're not going to be as invested as someone who's in-house.
That's such a cool perspective, Gloria, and definitely spoken from, someone who's entrenched in it every day, and where your passion and focus aligns. Yeah. So Ian had come up with our walk-off home run question that we want to ask everybody at the end of every show. And we'll see, depending on time here, maybe Ian could even chime in with what his answer would be. But Gloria, to ask you our question here, you come from the front lines, and as you shared at the beginning, what would be your one piece of advice that you would pass along to people that are on the front lines out there?
I have two.
Right.
Yes. First one is be prepared to wear many hats. When I was on site, I was a leasing agent one day, I was a manager the next. I'm also a therapist, a friend, whatever the resident needs. At the end of the day, they've lived there and they chose to live there and to provide the best customer service. Sometimes you have to wear a lot of hats. The next is this industry is growing. It's changing every day. So be adaptable to change and be open to it. I promise you, it is a fun ride. This industry has been amazing to work for. And if you're adaptable to change, you'll do just fine.
Those are both awesome answers and great tips. Ian, we should just write a book with our walk-off
Absolutely.
Of everybody's tips in there. I think those are tips to hold on to. Ian, do you want to share yours in the last minute?
Sure. I'm sure if I thought about it more, I could give one right off the cuff, though. Is definitely just embrace failure. I think everyone is really are afraid to fail and afraid of screwing up. And I think if you go back and look, that's where people learn the most from their failures and see them as those learning opportunities. I think is a great tip and so embrace failure.
I love that. I think that should be a part of our fabric period, because it will just make you jump that much faster. I think I'm still reeling from our opening and saying that I was Ian. It makes me think about when John Elway did a press conference here in Denver and said a thank you to John Elway. Now I actually relate, and everybody on all the sports talk shows makes fun of him and plays that clip all the time. Well, I can relate with that. Exactly. Thank you to Jonathan, our producer, for changing my name. So that was wonderful. And any final comments, Ian or Gloria? It's been the delight.
No, this was great. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome. Yeah, I hope everyone got some really took away some nice, good perspective of a role that's not necessarily given the voice that it usually deserves. So yeah, it was great having you on here. Yeah, a lot of fun, and definitely tune in next week. We have another great speaker with Nicole McLemore coming on, and excited to talk to you then.
Yes. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.